This is Story Recapped. Today, I'm going to explain a horror, sci-fi, thriller film called The Last Days on Mars. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. On the barren desert of Mars, Vincent Campbell and Rebecca Lane drive toward a sandstorm to reach an excavation site. Lane remarks that their crewmate, Kim Ulrich, would not be happy about the storm because it would mess up her dig. When they arrive at the excavation site, Vincent tells Kim over the radio to wrap up because they have to return to base and prepare to leave the planet in 19 hours. Kim, however, doesn't respond and continues with her dig. As they wait for Kim, Lane asks Vincent to list 10 things that he won't miss on Mars. Vincent makes it clear that he can't stand Kim's attitude when he names her on the list several times. He then adds that he's concerned about the 6-month journey back to Earth. Lane points out that the journey wouldn't be so bad because they get to walk on green grass under a blue sky at the end of it. When Kim finally boards the rover, she laments that they're returning to Earth empty-handed because they didn't have enough time to accomplish anything significant on their 6-month-long mission. On their way back to the Tantalus base, Captain Charles Brunel tells them to hurry up because they need help fixing their communications link to the Aurora space station. Richard Harrington manages to restore the signal, but the power suddenly goes out. Later, Marko Petrovic asks Brunel to go to one of their excavation sites, claiming that he needs to fix a broken gamma sensor. Brunel reluctantly agrees, but he asks Marko to take Harrington with him and return before it gets dark. Vincent, Kim, and Lane arrive as Marko and Harrington prepare to leave the base. Kim gets upset upon learning that Brunel permitted Marko to go out. On their way to the site, Marko instructs Harrington to prepare the sample boxes and label them MA-1 for microscopic anomaly. While Vincent repairs the cooling system at the base, mission psychologist Robert Irwin approaches him and offers him a coffee. Vincent notices the approach trajectory of the Aurora lander and remarks that the pilots would be pulled over for drunk driving if they were on Earth. Irwin advises him to wait until he boards the ship before worrying about the lander. When Irwin asks if he's not excited to get home, Vincent notes that he's not worried about getting home, but he's concerned about the journey and the time it takes to get there. Kim decides to check on Marko's workstation to find out why he wants to go back outside. Not long after, the crew finds an image of cavities on a rock. Lane remarks that the cavities appear to be microbial beings. When they look at the sample under the microscope, they find signs of bacterial cell division. Kim realizes that Marko refuses to tell Brunel about his discovery because he doesn't want to share the credit. Brunel contacts Harrington and Marko to declare the excavation site off limits. Marko, however, instructs Harrington to pretend that he didn't hear Brunel because of his weak signal. As Marko looks at the soil sample he just took, the ground below suddenly collapses and swallows him up. Harrington rushes out of the rover to help him, but he can't see through the pit because of the steam. Soon after Harrington contacts the base, Brunel arrives with Lauren Dalby to rescue Marko. However, Harrington declares that Marko is dead. Dalby thinks that Marko could still be alive, so she attempts to go down the pit, but Brunel stops her for fear that she might be injured in an accident. Brunel and Harrington return to the base to pick up the proper gear to retrieve Marko's body, while Dalby stays at the excavation site. Soon after they enter the base, Kim asks Brunel about announcing their discovery. Harrington points out that Marko just died, but Kim hints that it's Marko's own fault for violating the protocol. Soon, Mission Control permits them to retrieve Marko. Before they head out, Irwin advises Brunel to reprimand Kim for her behavior. He tells the captain that Marko's death is not his fault, but Brunel points out that any mistakes made by the crew are his responsibility. Brunel takes Lane, Irwin, and Vincent back to the site because he feels it wouldn't be fair to send Harrington back. As Dalby waits in the rover, she suddenly hears someone trying to get inside the vehicle. She tries to tell Brunel over the radio, but he can't hear her due to the interference. When the team arrives at the excavation site, Dalby is nowhere to be found, so Brunel deduces that she disobeyed his orders and went into the pit. Lane, however, thinks that Dalby fell because it's not in her nature to disobey an order. Vincent soon goes down the pit after strapping his suit to a rope. When he gets near the bottom, he notices a microbial organism growing on a rock formation. He goes down further but starts hyperventilating as he recalls being trapped in the Aurora space station. Brunel immediately tells Lane and Irwin to bring him back up. After Vincent calms down, he tells Brunel that he didn't see anyone at the bottom of the pit. Irwin looks around the area and finds 2 sets of footprints that appear to be heading for the base. Brunel is perplexed because they could have taken the rover. The crew soon contacts Kim and tells her to prepare for possible casualties. Kim notes that Marko could be suffering from brain damage due to oxygen deprivation because his suit is probably damaged. When Harrington checks the tracking system, he sees 2 figures 50 meters away from the base. As Kim tries to establish contact on the radio, Harrington heads to the airlock to let them in. On the monitors, Kim sees a figure staggering towards the base. When Harrington opens the airlock, Marco stumbles to the ground with a hole in his helmet. After removing the helmet, Harrington staggers back in shock upon seeing Marco's emaciated face. Marco grabs an electric drill and stabs Harrington in the gut. Harrington drops to the ground, but he manages to sound the alarm to alert Kim. Not long after, Kim heads towards the airlock, but she immediately flees when she sees Marco walking towards her. An infected Dalby soon reaches the airlock, but Harrington escapes despite his wound. Soon, Marco and Dalby both catch up to Kim. As Kim struggles to get away from Marco, Dalby sips spilled liquid on the ground. Brunel soon arrives and finds the base in shambles. Kim manages to escape and lock the two infected astronauts in a room. As Marco breaks down the glass door, Brunel instructs Kim to get in his suit while he tries to hold off their infected crewmates. Brunel tries to reason with Marco when he gets out, but he doesn't appear to understand him. Kim soon leaves the base after putting on her suit. Brunel runs to the airlock, but the zombie catches him and stabs him in the shoulder before he can escape. The surviving crew members disable the door to trap the zombies and head to the hydroponic dome for shelter. Lane attempts to treat Brunel's wound, but she notes that she can't do it properly because she's not a medic. Brunel realizes that he's dying after failing to remember what his family looks like. He instructs the crew to tell his family that they were in his thoughts during the mission. Brunel then notes that he's thirsty, so Erwin gives him water. Brunel suddenly grabs Erwin by the neck, so the other crew members pull his hand away and subdue him. Brunel soon calms down and slowly loses consciousness. Before passing away, he warns the crew that they'll never see home. Kim ties Brunel to the table, for fear that his corpse will reanimate. Erwin urges her to stop, but Kim points out that Dalby and Marco are still moving after being exposed to the atmosphere. Vincent decides to cover the corpse with a blanket. Moments later, they hear an explosion outside. Kim looks at the monitor and discovers that the zombies escaped from the base after using an explosive to blow up the airlock. The crew can't contact the space station because the communication systems are down, so Vincent tells him that he'll have to go through the oxygen feed pipe underground to get back to the base to fix the Skylink and ask for help. As Vincent crawls down the pipe, Lane takes a sample of Brunel's blood and finds out that he's infected with the same bacteria in Marco's sample. After a few minutes, Vincent panics when he recalls what happened to him at the space station. Lane helps him calm down and tells him to forget about what happened to him on Aurora. Vincent points out that mission control is supposed to weed out people like him, so Lane explains that all crew members are as scared as he is. Vincent soon reaches the main base and sees blood all over the floor and the walls. Meanwhile, Lane realizes that they can try using antibiotics to neutralize the bacteria, so she takes a blood sample from Brunel to see how it would react in an antibiotic solution. When they inject the solution into Brunel, his body writhes and contorts. Lane surmises that he's trying to fight the infection, but Kim stresses that the movement is a result of his reflexes. When the corpse stops moving, Lane takes another blood sample and discovers that the bacteria is no longer multiplying. Kim pours the solution into a decontamination spray so that they can vaporize it and use it against the zombies. Vincent manages to contact Aurora, but the power suddenly shuts down before he can inform them about their emergency. Erwin suddenly notices from the monitor that the zombies are heading back to the base. Because they can't break down the doors of the hydroponic dome, they decide to unlock the door to lure the zombies to the airlock and spray them with the antibiotics. One of the zombies enters the airlock and starts writhing on the floor soon after they activate the decontamination spray. However, Lane discovers that the effect is only temporary, because the bacteria have started to develop a resistance to the antibiotic. On his way to fix the power, Vincent comes across an infected Harrington. He bashes the zombie's head repeatedly with a flashlight, but he won't stay down, so he runs back to the oxygen pipe. Vincent asks Lane to open the panel, but he warns her that he wasn't able to seal the pipe on the other end. Before opening the panel, Lane instructs Kim and Erwin to put on their helmets because Vincent didn't seal the pipe on the base. After they pull Vincent out of the pipe, Kim grabs 2 bottles of antibiotics and throws them at the zombie. As Kim distracts the zombie, the others try to flee from the dome, but they can't open the airlock. Erwin notices that Brunel's corpse is starting to reanimate, so he decides to lock the door, leaving Kim and the other zombie inside. The surviving crew members manage to open the door, but the zombie stabs Lane in the leg with a scissor before they can escape. The crew heads to the rover as soon as they get outside. Vincent injects Lane with an antibiotic to slow down the bacteria and give her body time to fight the infection. Not long after, they find out that they don't have enough power on the rover to reach the landing site. Erwin notes that they have to go on foot, but Lane can't walk because of her injury, so Vincent suggests heading back to the base to treat her wound. When Erwin points out that they have other options, Lane surmises that he wants to leave her behind because she might be infected. Lane argues that Irwin might be infected too, because Brunel grabbed his neck earlier. Irwin recalls that there's another rover at Marco's excavation site, and notes that it still has enough power to make it to the landing site. When they reach the dig, Irwin heads to the other rover on foot. After getting inside the vehicle, Irwin contacts Vincent and convinces him to leave Lane behind because he believes that she's infected. When Vincent refuses, Irwin decides to take off on his own. The zombies manage to follow their trail, so Vincent and Lane drive the rover through a sandstorm in the hopes of losing them. Vincent asserts that they'll have enough power to get to the landing site in the morning after the sun charges the rover's batteries for an hour. Later, Lane confesses that she keeps wondering if some part of Brunel's mind remains when she saw him struggling. She's concerned that Brunel might still be trapped in his body without the ability to control it. Soon, the Aurora lander departs the space station and heads to the planet. In the morning, Vincent wakes up and hears a message from the space station, informing them that they are sending an emergency team to rescue them. Vincent tries to respond to the message, but the space station can't hear him. Vincent realizes that Lane has left the rover, so he follows her footsteps. He eventually finds her, but Lane tells him to stay back, because she feels the infection is already taking effect. Vincent runs over to her, but Lane removes her helmet and suffocates to death. Not long after, her body reanimates and attacks Vincent. After Vincent restrains her, Lane begs him to kill her, so he reluctantly grabs a rock and bashes her head in. Moments later, Vincent sees the Aurora lander approaching, so he runs to the landing site. Vincent sees 3 zombies heading to the lander, so he cautions them against opening the ship's hatch. Vincent can hear them over the radio, but the lander crew can't seem to hear him. Soon after they leave the ship, Vincent hears them screaming in terror as zombies attack them. When Vincent boards the ship, he sees Irwin sitting in the cockpit. Although conscious and self-aware, Irwin is manifesting signs of infection, so Vincent tells him that he can't let him go home because they can't risk taking the bacteria to Earth. Irwin attacks him and manages to plunge a knife through Vincent's helmet in the scuffle. As Irwin attempts to fly the ship, Vincent takes the knife and stabs Irwin. Irwin charges at Vincent as the aircraft flies to space on its own. Vincent headbutts Irwin repeatedly until he stops moving. He then takes off his helmet stained with Irwin's blood and opens the hatch to eject the corpse. Later, Vincent sends a message to Mission Control to inform them that the entire crew of Tantalus Base has been infected with a virulent bacteria, and the relief team they sent also perished. He notes that he doesn't have enough fuel to fly to the space station, but he has enough supplies that could last until they send a rescue team. However, he notes that he's likely infected. He reveals his plan to plunge the ship back to Mars if he finds out that he's infected, so he won't suffer from a slow, painful death when it burns up in the atmosphere. Vincent ends the message, saying that he will stand by for a reply after the transmission reaches the Aurora in 15 minutes. The lander floats in the darkness of space as he waits for the space station to respond.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.